or is the thing I'm going to talk about last is what I like to call Be Alligator Smart. And that's, oh, hold on. And Be Alligator Smart is about how you can do things and make choices about your own behavior or your own environment that decreases the risk of interactions with alligators. All right, so alligators have quite a large population here in our state. There's about 1.3 million alligators in our state, and there's about 20 million people. So that's about one alligator for every 20 people in our state. And alligators are in all 67 counties. The picture or map on the bottom of your screen is their home range. So alligators occur all the way along the Atlantic coast up into North Carolina, all throughout our state, of course, and then all along the Gulf Coast, all the way to Texas. They are quite populous in our state, especially, as well as in Louisiana, have the highest populations of alligators. They are freshwater critters, so they are going to prefer freshwater wetlands such as swamps, rivers, and lakes, although they can be found in what we call brackish water, which is when fresh water mixes with salt water in some of our rivers that are emptying into the intercoastal or out into the Gulf. They can even occasionally, for short periods of time, tolerate salt water. But that is really unusual, rare behavior to see an alligator actually out in the Gulf. And then, of course, as our human population continues to increase here in Florida, we all like to live around the water. And so that is where alligators like to live too. And the more we develop around our freshwater sources, the more likely we're going to have sightings or maybe even interactions between people and gators. So learning a little bit better about how to live around them while we're in their habitat can be very helpful. So the population of alligators here in our state actually was depleted quite a bit starting in the 1950s due to habitat loss and hunting. And they were listed as an endangered species prior to the Federal Endangered Species Act. So you can see in 1967, they were actually listed and protected. And they were protected until 1977 here in our state. But even though they have fully recovered their population, they actually are still protected in our state under a designation called threatened due to similarity of appearance. So since 1987, they're federally protected in all their range because they look so similar to crocodiles. And crocodiles actually do have a threatened population, and therefore we don't want someone to do something to a crocodile because they mistake the crocodile for an alligator. So we protect both species because they look so similar. Alligators can legally be taken, meaning they can be hunted or removed only by individuals with proper licenses and permits. And you get those through the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, or the FWC. So not anyone can do anything to an alligator because they are a protected species, but they do have licensed alligator hunts. And of course, they have trappers that can remove alligators as long as they have the correct licenses and permits. So this is a picture of a pretty large alligator. This one I took up in Pinellas County at Booker Creek Preserve. This was probably about a 12-foot alligator, and that means it was more than likely a male because males are usually the ones that are larger than 10 feet. Females are usually 10 feet or less in length. And females can get upwards of 200, 250 pounds. The males can actually be larger and be as heavy as 500 pounds or even more in some unusual circumstances. They start out, though, as only about 9 to 10 inches long when they're born. I'll show you a picture of a young one in a minute. So when they hatch, they're about 9 to 10 inches long, and they'll grow 2 to 12 inches per year, just depending on how healthy that year is. So if it's a good year, lots of food available, no hurricanes or other stressors, they're more likely to grow almost a foot a year. But of course, it's tough out there in the wild. So if they have a stressor like a hurricane or a lack of food, or they need to move around a lot because habitat's not available, then they're probably going to grow closer to 2, 4, 5 inches in that year. And if you see an alligator from a distance, and often we see them in the water when we see them, we only see their head poking up. So you can estimate the size of that alligator by estimating the inches between the end of his nose, so right here, end of his nose, to the eye ridge. And those are usually the parts that are showing up even if the alligator is sort of low in the water. So if you estimate, for instance, that it's about 8 inches from the end of the nose to the eye ridge, then you're probably looking at about an 8-foot alligator. So however many inches between the nose and the eye ridge, that's how many feet in length the alligator is likely to be. So what do alligators eat? Well, they're what we call predatory opportunistic feeders. So yes, they are predators. In fact, we consider them an apex predator in the freshwater ecosystem. So they're sort of at the top of the food chain, but they are opportunistic feeders, meaning they're just going to eat what's, what's easy opportunity for them. I like to think of them sort of as couch potatoes. That, if I've had a long, hard day and I'm tired and I want to put my feet up and my husband brings me a snack, maybe it's a bowl of popcorn, which isn't my favorite snack. Well, if it's right in front of me, I'm going to eat it. Nice and easy. Doesn't take a lot of energy to get it. So alligators are the same way. They don't want to expend a lot of energy. They often don't have the ability to expend a lot of energy, especially if they're cold, because they are ectothermic or cold-blooded animals. So they are going to want to eat what's close and easy to take. So if a turtle, which is what you're seeing in this picture here, if a turtle swims in front of an alligator, then, well, that turtle might be the alligator's dinner. Alligators also generally on average eat about every other week. So once every 2 weeks. They aren't eating every single day. They're eating sort of randomly whenever they're hungry and their metabolism is going because they've warmed themselves up. Little alligators, the juvenile ones, they're going to eat small stuff. They're going to eat things like insects and amphibians like frogs, small fish, and other invertebrates. Whereas the larger adult alligators are going to eat larger fish, they'll eat snakes, turtles, they'll even eat small mammals like raccoons and even birds if they're able to catch the birds. Of course, the birds usually fly away first if they're healthy. And part of the reason that I'm doing alligator presentations like crazy right now is because it is mating season. So during mating season is when we're more likely to see alligators moving around because the boys are looking for the girls. So the alligators are moving around, not only looking for a mate, but also mating season corresponds usually with the driest part of our year. So their freshwater homes are often drier and maybe not providing as much food as they would during rainy season. So also alligators are moving during dry season because they're finding another source of water, which is going to have hopefully more food for them. So we see them more, we get concerned more, the news talks about them a lot more, and then all of a sudden I'm getting calls to do more alligator education, which is great. So yes, you are more likely to see them right now. That is totally normal, natural behavior for them. So an alligator reaches sexual maturity at about 6 to 7 feet, and that's about 8 to 12 years old for a male and 10 to 15 years old for a female. So it takes them a while to get ready to get in the mood for mating. Courtship begins in early April. And as males are courting for the females, they, like many wildlife, are going to try to show off for the females. And the way male alligators do that is they do a display. They will sort of pick their tails up, they'll pick their heads up, they'll sort of show themselves off, and then they will do this bellow, which actually to me sounds like a growl or a grunting. And the first few times I heard it when I first moved to Florida many years ago, I didn't know what that sound was. I didn't know if it was a dinosaur or what, because it's loud, it's guttural, it's deep. And basically the males will bring air into their mouth and they have sort of this extra tissue under their chin. and the air will come into there. And then as they push the air back out, it vibrates their whole body and it will make this deep guttural sound. And it's pretty cool to see if they're actually in water, the water around them will all vibrate and ripple out. So I don't know, I think it's pretty impressive. So those female alligators must be pretty impressed by it too. I can try, I have a sound here. I think I can play this and have you guys hear it. Let's give it a try. Oh, hold on. Try again. Sierra, are you able to hear that?
Yes. That's a funny sound.
I know it's not necessarily what you would expect to hear from an alligator, and you might not expect to hear it, you know, when you're out walking around in habitat where an alligator might be. But if you hear that, then you are probably hearing an alligator showing off for the females. This is what a nest looks like that the female will build. So she will get together a bunch of vegetation and pile it all together. So right here, this dried vegetation is actually the nest. And that nest can be 2 to 3 feet high and 5 to 7 feet wide. So they can be pretty large. They're often like on the edge of a river or a stream or a lake. And they're sort of underneath the vegetation is mud, and then she will lay 32 to 46 eggs in there, usually around late June to early July. And what's really amazing to me is that alligators have a really tiny brain. It's really honestly about the size of a walnut, so about that big. It's the size of a walnut with its shell on, and their brain weighs about the weight of 3/4. So that's not a lot of brain tissue. They are very primitive primal animals. And even so, the female knows exactly how to move around the vegetation on her nest to adjust the temperature of the nest, which I think is amazing. And in reptiles, the gender of the babies is actually determined by the temperature of the nest that the egg is in. So there's usually a temperature striation in that nest, and the warmer the nest area is, the more likely those babies when they hatch will be males, and the colder parts of the nest will be females. And I think I have that on the next slide. Yes. So here is a picture of an adorable baby alligator. So it's almost Mother's Day. So I have my motherly instincts thinking that this is adorable, this little baby guy. And this is what they look like when they're hatched. This one is just hatched. These are the eggs. Reptile eggs tend to be leathery, and these are oval. Turtle eggs more often are very round and ping pong ball size, but this is an oval leathery alligator egg. Here is the baby alligator, and you can see they are more brightly striped. They have this thing called an egg tooth right here at the tip of their nose when they're born, because that allows them to help sort of rip open those leathery shells and get out of them when they're ready to hatch. So eggs hatch about mid-August through early September. It takes about 2 months for those eggs to incubate in the nest before hatching. But remember that all of this is averages, and nature has its own way of doing things sometimes. So even though eggs generally hatch mid-August through early September, last year I was out kayaking the Myakka River right after the hurricane. I was actually out with my husband, who now is a division manager for our Sarasota County parks. And we were checking a part of the Myakka River that goes through one of the county preserves to see if it was open for people to be able to travel before they opened up the preserve. And so that was much later, a few weeks later than we would normally see baby alligators. And we came upon a whole bunch of baby alligators that had just hatched. And as we went by them in our kayak, they were sort of on the edge of the shore of the river. They all just jumped into the river. And that's the first thing that alerted me to them, as I heard these little plop, plop, plop into the water. And I looked over, and there were just all these little alligators just about this size jumping into the river, because that, of course, is where they feel safe. They feel more protected there. So really sweet to see when you get a chance to see them. All right, in terms of being an alligator out in the wild, life is pretty hard. Only about 1/3 of the nest each year, or actually 2/3 of the nest each year survive. 1/3 of them are destroyed by predators like a raccoon getting into them and eating the eggs, or by one of our heavy rain events once the rainy season kicks in and the nests get flooded out. So out of the 2/3 of nests that actually survive, 1/3 of the eggs in those nests don't even hatch. So already before we're even talking about alligators being born, life is really hard and a large percentage of them are, those eggs just aren't going to survive. So about 24 eggs approximately hatch from each nest. Out of those 24, only about 10 of those will survive into the first year. And then out of those 10, only 5 are going to survive to actual maturity. So about 5 alligators out of 2/3 of the nest each year are going to survive to become adults. Not very many. So eggs are a delicacy for raccoons, but also our wild hogs, bears, which we don't have here in Sarasota County, but in other parts of the state, and otters will eat the eggs. Juvenile alligators will be eaten also by raccoons and otters, but wading birds like our egrets and herons will grab those little baby alligators and swallow them right down. Fish and also some of the larger alligators will actually cannibalize those smaller alligators as well. And then adult alligators, they are mostly killed by intraspecific aggression. This is when 2 alligators fight and one of them gets injured enough that they actually die, and hunting are the main causes. Also, alligators get hit in the road a lot. So I don't know if you've seen one that's been hit in the road. I have seen many and actually had to pull one out of the road that was still alive but wasn't going to survive much longer. So that was a very sad thing to come upon. But it does, especially at this time of the year, it's a really important to watch out for all of our wildlife. It's mating season for almost every wildlife species out there. And a lot of the wildlife often are having their babies too. And so, of course, if you've been here for any period of time, you've seen the sandhill cranes with their babies. They're very comfortable walking around where humans are and crossing roads. I've also seen a lot of turtles get hit recently because they also are dealing with dry season and maybe crossing roads to get from one pond to another. So just keep your eyes open for wildlife, especially during the springtime. If an alligator survives all of this and lives to adulthood, they can live in the wild up to 30 to 50 years. So here's what alligator tracks look like in case you're interested. So especially in muddy areas where alligators live, you might get a chance to see tracks, but you might not be close enough to their habitat to see that. But this is what they look like in case you're interested. Here's the back foot of an alligator. This is an alligator that I took a picture of at Everglades National Park. It was seriously about 2 or 3 feet away from me because it was basking in the sun right along a paved trail that is one of the most popular paved trails in Everglades National Park. So it was a little too close for most people's comfort, but you can see they have very powerful back legs with these long nails. This is what alligator scat looks like, just in case you're interested. Generally don't see it. Often it's not, in areas where people normally are, or it washes away easily with rain, but this one's a little old and dried up, but alligator scat is mostly white, although it can have some greenish brown components to it as well. But reptiles, like birds, only have one opening for excrement. So like bird poop, alligator scat has a lot of white from the uric acid. So it looks a little bit different than we would expect wildlife scat to look. So I want to talk just a little bit about how important alligators are to our ecosystem, because of course, everything that's here is here for a reason, and they have a really important reason or benefits to our ecosystems. So just by being a freshwater apex predator, that makes them important because they're keeping other populations of animals in balance. So if we didn't have our predator animals, we would be overrun by things like rats and raccoons and possums, sort of like those middle-sized animals. Our apex predators, like our alligators, our panthers, our hawks and owls, keep that sort of middle size animal population in balance so that we don't have too many of some of those animals that maybe we don't want too many of. Alligators, especially in the Everglades, also provide an important ecological benefit by making things called alligator holes. So, and they do it a little bit up here, but it's really more important down in the Everglades. So they will actually wallow out a hole with their tail. They're sort of move around and sort of scrape a hole out with their tail in the mud. And then during during dry season, this is sometimes one of the only sources of water for not only other species of wildlife, but for some of our endangered and threatened amphibians and fish that need water either to survive or to breed in. Sometimes the alligator holes are the only opportunity for those animals to do that. And so they are called also an indicator species because down in the Everglades especially, alligators play such an important role that when we talk about Everglades ecosystem restoration, we often use the population of alligators to be an indicator of how well we are restoring the Everglades. So to me, that really indicates their importance. And then we also consider them a keystone species. And if you're around my age, you remember when bridges were made of stones and bricks, and that center triangular stone, that's called the keystone. And so if you think about the bridge and the engineering of the bridge, if you pull that keystone out of the center of the bridge, the entire arch collapses. And so animals like alligators and gopher tortoises that we refer to as keystone species, it's really because they are so important to the ecosystem that they live in that that ecosystem actually could collapse if alligators or gopher tortoises went extinct. All right, so I'm going to do a couple frequently asked questions. I'm going to do some myths, and then we'll talk about making smart choices around alligators. And I forgot to mention, if you have questions, I'm going to hold questions to the end because I might end up answering them during the presentation. But if you have a question and you're concerned about remembering it, you can type it into your chat box and I'll look at the chat box at the end as well. But you certainly will be able to unmute at the end and ask a question also. So sometimes people ask me how long alligators can stay underwater because they're like, that alligator went under the water and now I don't know where it is. Well, their normal dives are about 4 to 6 minutes long. That's about on average how long they'll stay underwater. But they can stay underwater for 15 to 20 minutes. They actually can stay underwater for upwards of 2 hours, but that is incredibly unusual. They don't usually stay under for much longer than 5, maybe 15 minutes at a time. So this is a myth I hear a lot, that people think you can avoid an alligator by running in a zigzag pattern. So that is totally a myth. First of all, alligators are not going to chase you, especially as an adult. You're much too big. So they are not interested in expending the energy to chase you. And even if they did, you wouldn't want to run in a zigzag pattern, because if you run in a zigzag pattern and an alligator runs straight, that alligator is going to cut you off pretty quick. So don't run in a zigzag pattern. Alligators actually can run for very short distances at about 10 miles per hour. They don't usually run after prey. Once again, they're ectothermic, they're cold-blooded. That takes a lot of energy, and they usually just don't want to expend that much energy. But they will lunge out of their water source that they're in to get at something that looks like a good meal if it's time for them to eat. And because of that, we usually recommend that we stay away from the edge of water at least 10 feet away. So certainly for your pets and smaller children, you want to keep them 10 feet away from the edge of water, because alligators can lunge up onto the shore. They're also capable of swimming at speeds upwards of 10 miles per hour too. So they're comfortable in the water, and they can be sort of fast in the water too. So another question that I often get from these community presentations is people will think that, well, if I cut all the plants around my stormwater ponds, then I can see an alligator coming. Well, first of all, usually there's regulations about how your stormwater ponds are managed. And those plants around your stormwater ponds, which are the lakes that you live around, those plants are actually performing a really important benefit by cleaning the water and improving water quality. Your stormwater ponds are meant to help hold water, hold runoff, and then those plants are part of the water quality cleaning process. And actually, even if you were allowed to cut the plants, leaving that empty shoreline is a wonderful invitation for alligators to now come and bask on the shoreline. So alligators are going to want to bask in the sun. This is totally normal behavior because once again, they're ectothermic and they're trying to warm up their body so that their metabolism gets moving so that they can do their daily things. And so an open bank is more of an invitation. So usually what we recommend if people are able to make some choices about their stormwater ponds and they want a planted area, but they might also want an open area, you actually want your open area on the opposite side from where your residential homes are. And then that way, if an alligator is going to come out and bask, he's basking on the opposite side. And of course, do alligators make good pets? No, they don't. And it is illegal. All right, so here's our slide where we're going to talk about the statistics and reality of alligator bites, because it does happen, unfortunately. They're wild animals and people live right where alligators live all throughout our states. So since 1948, our FWC, which is the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, they have been keeping records. So we now have records that are more than 70 years long. So since 1948, Florida, the whole state, has averaged 6 unprovoked bites per year. So I don't talk about the provoked bites. Provoked alligator bites are like somebody's handling an alligator and they shouldn't be, or they're handling an alligator in a zoo or something like that. Or, occasionally you see these stories on the news where 20-something-year-olds drink a little too much and see an alligator on the side of the road and do things that are illegal and harass that alligator. Well, of course, in those cases, that's what we would consider a provoked bite, and there's more of a reason for those. So the ones we're often more concerned about are the unprovoked bites, and those average out at 6 per year. And then in terms of fatalities from those unprovoked bites, those average out over the last 70-some years to be 1 fatality every other year. So I don't want to downplay the seriousness and concern about this because, of course, anytime something happens to a human being or to our pets, that is really upsetting and really difficult. So yes, it does happen, but I want to put it in perspective how rarely it happens. So in perspective, there are 5 deaths due to lightning strikes each year in Florida. So you're way more likely, in fact, you're 10 times more likely to die due to a lightning strike than you are to an alligator encounter. And of course, in Florida, we have the most deaths due to lightning in our country because we are the lightning capital. And we all know here in Florida, especially when we hear thunder, it's time to go inside. You don't just stand outside in an open field or under a metal structure during a thunderstorm here in Florida because we know the concerns about lightning. But therefore, we just need to learn a little bit more about alligators and how to behave around them. So I recently added this statistic that annually in our whole country, deer vehicle collisions result, because this is astounding to me, and I'm from the Northeast, so I know all about the problems with, being careful driving at night around deer territory. But in our country, deer vehicle collisions result in greater than 59,000 human injuries a year, with more than 440 human fatalities every year in our country. So deer are far more concerning than alligators. Here in Florida, we average 30 shark bites per year. So also something to consider, that's much more than the 6 bites per year from alligators. And once again, we have behaviors that we do when we're at the ocean and we're at the beach, just like we can adopt some behaviors to make sure we decrease our risk around alligators. And then as a dog lover, I have 3 dogs at home with me right now that are being very good and quiet for you guys. But as a dog lover, I wanted to include this because there are actually 35 fatalities a year in the United States due to dog bites and 1,000 visits to the emergency room per day in our country due to dog bites. So dogs, sharks, deer, lightning, all bigger concerns than alligators. So in 73 years, 26 alligator bites have been fatal. So once again, that actually averages out to about 1 in every 3 years. The likelihood of being seriously injured by an alligator bite in Florida is roughly 1 in 3.1 million. So although we see a lot of things on the news right now about alligators being out and about, and if an alligator injury or fatality sadly happens, that's usually all over the news and it is very sad. But I just want you to have a little perspective that these things are very rare and unusual. And then I have some other things about some other statistics right there. So basically, you're more likely to die from a fall. You're more likely to die from being struck by lightning or killed by a shark, but you are more likely to get bit by an alligator than you are to win the Florida lottery. So there you go. All right. Alligators really, so now let's talk a little bit more about this and about how we can decrease that risk. So really the thing is that alligators have a natural fear of humans. They don't really want to have anything to do with us. It's just that we've now built houses and shops and things all in their territory, and we have to figure out how to better coexist with them. So they do have the potential to lose their natural fear of us when they are fed. So this is the #1 big issue is please don't ever feed an alligator. Please don't ever let friends or family that are visiting you feed an alligator. And if you see someone feeding an alligator, say something, because it's that alligator that's fed that is more likely to become a problem to us and our family members and our pets, because they lose their natural fear of humans and they associate us with easy food at that point. So this is when most bites happen, is when an alligator is fed and they've lost their fear of humans, and then they see a human near their territory, and instead of going the other way because they should be scared of that human, they sometimes are more interested in that human, thinking that it's an easy source of food. So it's actually completely illegal to feed an alligator because of that, because we're trying to protect the alligators and we're trying to protect the humans. Alligators capture their prey in the water, not usually on land, but as I said earlier, they will lunge out of the water. So most bites happen in or near the water. Most alligator bites happen because the alligator is attempting to eat, and some of them are due to the alligator trying to protect itself. So there was a bite last year up, I think it was in the Hillsborough River, I believe, where a gentleman was diving for fossils in the river and he bumped into an alligator, and the alligator, not knowing what it was or what was happening, swung around and bit the gentleman. So once again, they're wild animals. They're going to try to protect themselves. And then small animals and children are more at risk because they are the size of alligators' prey. So if alligators eat raccoons, alligators, depending on the size of the alligator and the size of a wild hog, may even eat a wild hog that's come down to the edge of the water to drink. So if you think about the size of those types of prey, if your dog or a family member is smaller, the alligator just doesn't know. Like, alligators' brains are small. They don't realize, oh, this is someone's loved pet that's come down to the edge of the water. The alligator is just like, oh, I'm hungry and this looks like a raccoon. So once again, the biggest things are don't feed an alligator and keep small animals and children, your loved ones, your pets, away from the water's edge by at least 10 feet. So here are my alligator smart tips right up there. Never feed an alligator. I think I've said it like 6 times already. So, and I've also heard that some signs have been ordered for around your ponds to help you guys remember that. Or to help people that maybe are visiting and aren't familiar with our ponds here in Florida, that they are habitat for alligators. It's just a good reminder to stay away from those ponds and never feed an alligator. If you're going to swim in freshwater areas here in Florida, make sure they're assigned swimming areas and be aware of your surroundings, because there can be an alligator in any freshwater body here in Florida. And then the next one is that stay 10 feet away from the water's edge. So if you're walking your dog, even if you my dogs are large, I would never let my dog go swimming in the water here in Florida. And I wouldn't even let them walk down to the edge of a river, a stream, a pond, and take a drink. Because even though my dogs are large, you know, once again, alligators have small brains, or alligators vary in size. So I would keep all of your pets on a leash. There is a leash law here in Sarasota County, so they should be on a leash anyways. So keep all of your pets on a leash and a good 10 feet away from that water's edge. Make sure that you're also behaving well too. Observe or photograph alligators from a distance. Many of you may actually love alligators, which is great, but don't overlove them and don't get too close. Alligators are most active between dusk and dawn. So those times, anytime between sunset and sunrise and all the time at night, that's when they're most active and more likely to be feeding. So certainly, definitely stay away from water during those times. Here's one of the sources of feeding that sometimes people don't think of. If you like to fish, you don't want to clean your fish and then throw those fish entrails or the fish scraps back into the water. You want to throw them into the garbage. When you throw them into the water, if there's an alligator in that water source, that alligator now is associating easy food, easy, delicious food with a human being once again. So it's more obvious if you're actually feeding an alligator something like marshmallows, but you still are inadvertently feeding an alligator when you throw back fish scraps, or even a fish that, if you're doing catch and release, if that fish isn't going to make it, don't throw it back in the water. Because if there's an alligator there and they see a human doing this, they're associating easy food with humans. You don't ever want to handle alligators, even small ones. It's illegal. And let's see what else I have on here. So I really like to say have situational awareness. So pay attention. If you're out walking at dusk with a friend or with a pet, just have situational awareness and be aware of your surroundings. You'd want to do that anyways. And, you know, talk to other people and educate them. Educate your friends and family that are coming down, so they just understand that alligators are an amazing animal that's protected by law, and we shouldn't be feeding them or interacting with them in any way. So a lot of times I get questions about, well, what if an alligator, you know, comes up on my yard and, you know, is laying down on my yard or is laying down in my driveway, because we've seen things like that on the news. Well, once again, remember, this is somewhat natural behavior for alligators, especially at this time of the year. They're moving around, they're trying to find the girls, they're trying to find a water source, they're trying to find a place like water that has more fish or something for them to eat. So it is possible they might be traveling through your location. In that case, the best thing to do is just to give them space and time to move on. They're just doing what an alligator does. They aren't doing anything wrong. At that point, they aren't doing anything concerning. They are just behaving naturally, and your house or driveway or yard just happened to be in the midst of the path that they were taking. And really, they will probably get up and move on as soon as they have enough energy to do that. So if you're able to, just stay inside, stay where you are, don't go out, don't bother them, leave them alone, and then check a little bit later and see if they have moved on. So let's talk about what constitutes a nuisance alligator. So when should you be concerned? So first of all, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission doesn't consider any alligator under 4 feet a nuisance alligator. So under 4 feet alligators like this one that you see here. This is my husband removing one at Oscar Scherer State Park. So this was a small guy. It wasn't going to cause any problems to humans. They just wanted to get it out of the swimming lake that they check every day. And they moved it out to a different lake on property that was further away that people don't swim in. So under 4 feet, the alligator is not going to really be able to be a nuisance. It's just too small. If a larger alligator is behaving in a way that is concerning, so once again, that means more that they're exhibiting behavior that they have lost their fear of humans. That's when we might want to be more concerned. So normally, if you are walking and an alligator sees you, if you're kayaking or canoeing and an alligator sees you, they will go the other way. That's their normal behavior. Or sometimes, recently I had one just look at me. It turned around, it was in the water and I was hiking. It turned around and looked at me and I thought, oh no, has this alligator been fed? But it didn't come any closer. It was just interested and it didn't come any closer at all. An alligator that's been fed, that has lost its fear of humans, will actually swim towards a human when they see them on the side, like, you know, hiking on the land or something like that. So those are the ones that are a little bit more concerning. Those are the ones that you might consider calling the FWC about. So I have the number up there. The FWC is who you call, and then you should also secondarily call your community office and let them know that you have called the FWC. They would like you to contact them and give them the code that FWC gives you. FWC will usually ask you a few questions. They'll sort of do a triage and determine what they think the appropriate action is. And if they feel like it's appropriate and a concern, they will send out a licensed permitted trapper to then try to trap that alligator. So a nuisance gator bigger than 4 feet and believed to pose a threat to people, pets, or property by the way they're behaving. But if the alligator is just doing its normal thing, then they are not considered a nuisance gator, and really try to assess that before you make that phone call. Because alligators are not relocated. So if they are a problem, then certainly we want to deal with that. But the FWC receives about 17,000 complaints about alligators in our state every year. And because of that, about 8,000 alligators are killed each year. And I can pretty much guarantee that not all 8,000 of those alligators were problem alligators. But if the FWC gets a call and they can't figure that out, they're going to send somebody out and then that alligator is going to be killed. The average size of alligators that are trapped is about 7 feet long. So the FWC has a ton of alligator information on their website. And a lot of my information comes directly from their website. So if you want to learn a little bit more, you can just Google alligator FWC and it will get you to the information. I've heard that you've been getting some information that includes their pamphlets, like the Guide to Living with Alligator. They have a little 1-minute video about living with alligators that basically takes a lot of what I said and condenses it into about 1.5 minutes. So all that's available to you on the FWC website. And at the end, I'm going to put some of these links into the chat box so you'll be able to click directly on them from the chat box today. All right, we're coming down towards the end. So I'm just going to say a word about my webinars. So I do a lot of wildlife webinars. Currently, I haven't been doing a lot of them live, but they are all recorded and on my wildlife webpage, which you can get to by taking a picture of this QR code. And this presentation is available on my wildlife webpage. It's about an hour-long webinar recorded video that you can watch at any point, and I believe you guys are going to get an email about that. So if you have friends in your community that weren't able to attend today, they can watch a very similar presentation from me about alligator safety. And then, as I mentioned, I would tell you just a little bit more about our Master Naturalist courses coming up. So if you're interested in those, I think I have the link that I'll share in the chat box. But we have a 3-day class on interpreting your environment, which is all about telling the story of Florida's environment coming up in September. And then we do a 40-hour course on freshwater ecosystems. definitely learn about alligators in that one. That one will be doing January 26th through February 16th. So that's Wednesdays and Fridays for about 3.5 weeks. So you can always email me if you want more information or you're interested in these, and I'll also put the link to find out more information from UF about these courses. If you want to come on a walk with me, there aren't many more coming up. I just did one Tuesday at Sleeping Turtles North, but I do have a meditation walk coming up on May 22nd at Twin Lakes Park. So we do sort of a guided meditation walk out in nature. They're very peaceful and lovely, but the majority of our walks are 2-hour-long walks where we go to the preserves and we just walk and talk, and I identify species of plants and animals for you. The one we were on Tuesday, I actually found a glass lizard, which is a type of legless lizard, and picked it up and showed it to everyone. That was really cool. So those are just fun, casual walks through nature with us. So I want to thank you all. There's my email on the screen. You are always welcome to reach out to me. My job is community service and education. So I'm here for our Sarasota County residents to answer questions. If I don't know the answer, it's not my area of expertise, I will get you to the right person. So if it's anything environmental, please feel free to reach out to me. And if you would like to take a little survey, which is how we collect data on how well we did today, there's another QR code right there that you can take a picture of, and it's just a couple questions that you could answer. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and put these links into the chat box. There's a bunch of them. So if you open up your chat box, you can see the different links that I've put in there. I put the guide to living with alligators from the FWC, a link to the nuisance alligator program from the FWC. The third one is the survey link. The fourth one is my wildlife webinars and all my wildlife information. And then the last two are our Sarasota County Extension classes and the Master Naturalist class. All right, so that's what I have for y'all today. Feel free to unmute yourself. I don't see any questions in the chat box, but please feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question for me, and I'd be happy to answer it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Katherine. That was very informative. I definitely learned a few things. I had no idea that alligators ate every 1 to 2 weeks. And also the egg tooth to help them get out of their little eggs. That was really interesting. As you mentioned, I have been sharing the FWC flyers, so that has been going out every Friday. So homeowners do have, access to that information. And then we actually recorded this specific presentation and we'll be sharing that. So with your commentary and everything included. But yes, residents have the ability to unmute themselves if they want to make any comments or ask any questions. And I know before we started the call, we were discussing some of the other talks that you provide the community. I think, the one on all of the different like Florida wildlife and preserves would be, of interest to the homeowners. So I'll see if that's something that they're interested in, and maybe, like next month we could schedule another talk. Typically these are called Coffee with Castle. And so when we have our amenity building, we actually do these in person and have like coffee and, donuts and stuff provided for the homeowners. And then we have a guest speaker come in and we talk about, various subjects. So yeah, that would be really interesting to have.
Yep, we're always happy to present either in person or on Zoom. So whatever works out for all of you. And we have lots of different areas of expertise. So if there's anything else you or your residents are interested in, just let me know and I'm happy to try to find a speaker for you guys.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I don't see any questions coming in. But if anyone does have any questions, they're welcome to email me as well, and I can forward the questions over to you. So.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, have a great day.
All right, take care. Thank you.
Bye, you as well.